Hello and welcome. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. It's Cinco de Mayo, so get out there and celebrate, but celebrate safely. It's the 5th day of May 2022. It's 56 degrees and cloudy here at Site B. Today we are talking about doing a review of the role-playing game Grandma's Hand by Baglona Ojeda. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so I'm not even going to try. Balognojetade, Bologna Ojeda. Okay, so Grandma's Hands is one of the games that was nominated for a Nebula Award this year. And I went through the list of the games, and I pretty much had a copy of every one of the games except that was nominated except for two. And Grandma's Hand was only $8 on Amazon, so I picked it up. It is a 63-page digest size, zine size superhero role-playing game. Very little art. The system is powered by the apocalypse, which I guess just goes to show the ubiquitous awesomeness. The overpowering awesomeness of Powered by the Apocalypse that so many systems use it. And it pretty much has all the things you're used to from Powered by the Apocalypse. So if you have any familiarity with Powered by the Apocalypse or this style of, the moves and games and narrative stuff like that, then you're pretty familiar with this system. The list of powers is extremely limited. There is no example character. The art is definitely captures the feel of the genre, which we'll get into in a moment. Other than that, it's got an example adventure, but no example characters. It does have an interesting rule on heat, which is being wanted, and what kind of attention your character will get. Now, why is that important? Because Grandma's Hand, and I'm not sure, but I think this is the reason why it was nominated for Nebula, talks about the representation of people of color in comic books, thus the picture of Luke Cage. Though probably somebody's going to say I'm being racist by showing a picture of Luke Cage. So it talks about the golden age of comics, and pretty much comics all the way up to today, and how people of color were represented, especially in the golden age of comics, where they were represented as idiots, sidekicks, danger-prone racial stereotypes, and there really were very few positive people of color superheroes in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, until, you get Blade and Luke Cage and stuff like that. And then some people will even say Cyborg. Some people will even say that those characters were sort of racist. Thus, the art is very depictive of the blaxploitation era of film, and the feel is very much like what if you had superpowers in that point in time. So the concept is, what if there were people of color superheroes during the golden age of comics, and portrayed in comic books the same way characters like Captain America and the Spirit and the Shadow and Mandrake the magician and Tom Swift and all those guys were portrayed in comics during the 1930s through 1950s. And thus we get to the rules of heat, because the rules of heat talk about, well, okay, you're a person of color walking around in a world where you are looked down upon, and you're doing things that a person of color in that period of time probably would not have been allowed to do, looked down upon and been told things like know your place. So the rules for heat basically say heat generates the more you draw attention to yourself. You're a person of color outperforming vigilante actions in a white man's world, and doing that and drawing attention to yourself draws heat. The more heat you draw, the more attention you draw from legal authorities and not so legal authorities. So that's an interesting rule, especially considering the genre, but it could be applied to any game. I mean, especially superheroes. If you are running a superhero type or modern type game where the behavior of these player character individuals might be frowned upon, by the authorities, and if they're out there doing things, then they're drawing more attention to their stuff, thus generating heat. And Lord knows that's a word I like to use, generating heat, which is negative attention. So yeah, I'm saying a lot today. I guess the brain isn't working yet. I would like to see more powers. I would like to see more development for the various archetypes. Definitely like to see more rules and action, and just generally trying to encapsulate. I may not be speaking very well, but I'm using a lot of big words. Must be the fog. The feel of comics in that time period, and the feel of how the world treated people of colors. Then there's a little introduction of the history of people of color and their portrayal in comic books, and especially the very negative, stereotypical, prejudiced way they were portrayed in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. Doesn't really go into much about how when people of color characters were starting to be portrayed as positive. I guess we could go to like the blaxploitation type characters. Like, let's face it, Luke Cage is a blaxploitation character that got done good, and ended up being a very positive, incredible character. But when he started, he was a blaxploitation character. Shaft, Blade, whatever. So I assume the brief introduction and the rules on heat, and maybe the adventure, the example adventure, or why it was nominated for a Nebula. Other than that, it's very bare bones. Powered by the Apocalypse. If you have another Powered by the Apocalypse superhero system like Mass, you've got it. If you've got other superhero systems, they are definitely way better, much more descriptive list. Yeah, I mean, there's like 5 powers total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 powers. 11 powers throughout the whole book in a superhero role-playing game. So that's kind of a negative going against it. The combat system and everything else is what's Powered by the Apocalypse. It's stuff I've seen before. The introduction's interesting. It's stuff I didn't know about the history of the portrayal of people of color in comic books, but other than I understand that people in color in comic books were not treated very well, and still, even as today, are not treated very well. I couldn't find any pictures of it online. So, yeah, I can only assume the nomination for the Nebula Award is the rules on heat, the writing regarding the history, and maybe the sample adventure, because if they're just nominating it based upon the rules, then, yeah, the rules are nothing. And if you're getting nominated for a Nebula Award, the best of science fiction fantasy, then I'm not sure about this one, because I have the other ones that are nominated, and all of them are pretty well written. So I guess this is one that is being nominated because it addresses a very uncomfortable point in time in the history of the world, and how people of color were portrayed in comics back then, and how they still are portrayed in comics, and how people of color are still, treated in 2022, much less how they were treated in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s, which is, of course, as we know, shame on us, pretty damn awful. So there you go. If you're looking for a $9 take on Powered by the Apocalypse with very few powers, and if you're just curious, but I don't know, I mean, if I say I don't want to recommend it because, yeah, it's nothing really out of the blue or extraordinary. It doesn't really fill me with any sense of, wow, this is a game I wanted to play. If I wanted to play a Powered by the Apocalypse superhero game, there's way better. If I wanted to play a Powered by the Apocalypse game about life in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and how people of color were treated, there's probably a game that, well, maybe there's not a game that takes that on yet, which might be one of the reasons why this one was nominated. But yeah, but if I say anything negative about this, people are going to say, oh, you're racist, you don't understand. And it's like, yeah, I'm not judging it on how it portrays anything. I'm judging it as a system. I'm reviewing the system and the writing of the system, and whether this is something I think you should get, and whether I feel this is deserving of a best science fiction fantasy role-playing game of 2022. And other than the 3-page, this is how people of color were treated in comic books, it's got nothing really going for it than the heat rules, which I like. But yeah, they also feel like they were stolen right out of Grand Theft Auto. Oh, you've got 5 stars. Now you've got tanks chasing after you. So that feels like it was just Grand Theft Auto. But I appreciate the fact that somebody went out and did this, and it's a love letter to people of color comic book creators, people of color. That just doesn't sound right when you say that, right? Which is probably makes me sound racist. Oh, he's a people of color, person of color comic book creator. Well, I don't know the name, so yeah, there's no way I can review this without somebody saying I'm racist. I don't understand how the people of color were treated in the 1970s, 1980s. Yes, I do. I was there. I saw how people of color were treated. I'm also a Jew, so I saw how Jews were treated and still are treated. Much less LGBTQT. And let's face it, we treat everybody like crap. It's the general conclusion of humanity. But I'm not going to get into that because that's not that place on this to talk about politics. There's plenty of other YouTubers that use their game channel as a excuse to talk about politics. So we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to talk about how this addresses a certain horrible period of time and whether or not I think it's a good superhero system. And I can't recommend it because it's not really that impressive, but I can't not say don't get it because if I do, I'm racist. So make up your own mind. Don't listen to me. I'm a fucking idiot who doesn't know what they're talking about, whose brain doesn't work, and who hasn't had enough caffeine yet. Anyways, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to go play with my cat. If you appreciate this content, let me know. If you don't appreciate this content, let me know. If you have any commentary on the Grandma's Hand role-playing game, whether you actually had a chance to play it or not, let me know. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please subscribe. Remember, 700 subs by June 1st, and I'm going to do something crazy. Till then, talk to you later. And my apologies to the creator of this game for mispronouncing their name. See ya.